I fell for the hype. 10 crops I'll never plant again. Hey there, garden dreamers and green thumb explorers. Welcome back to Earthly Delights, the cozy corner where houseplants, backyard soil, and human patience all grow together. Whether you're nurturing a small jungle on your balcony, tending a tiny raised bed between busy workdays, or just trying to keep that one stubborn fiddle leaf alive, this video is for you. You see, most of us who love plants have fallen for the hype at least once. We scroll through perfect garden photos, watch glowing YouTube reviews, and think, that's the magic crop I need. But sometimes the reality hits harder than a summer drought. The plants spread too fast, the fruits taste awful, or the maintenance steals your weekends. Today, I'll share 10 crops I would never plant again. And trust me, it's not to discourage you. It's to save you the years, the soil, and the frustration I've already spent. Together, we'll uncover what makes some plants irresistible, yet completely impractical for real-world growers like us. Those who value space, simplicity, and honest joy over hype. So grab your tea, settle into your favorite green corner, and let's dig in. If you love discovering smarter, calmer ways to grow beauty at home, don't forget to subscribe to Earthly Delights so you never miss a story from our garden to yours. Part 1. The goji berry, the plant that refused to quit. You know those glossy photos of goji berries? Bright red jewels hanging from a lush green vine, promising youth, energy, and 1,000 antioxidants? Yeah, I fell for that too. I imagined bowls of homegrown superberries, smoothies bursting with color, and a plant that would quietly reward me for years. Instead, what I got was a sprawling, rebellious intruder that refused to stay in its lane. The truth is, the goji berry looks innocent at first. It grows fast, it flowers early, and you start to think, wow, this was easier than I thought. But give it one season, and suddenly it's everywhere. Each stem that touches the ground roots itself, sending suckers into every direction like it's trying to conquer your entire garden bed. Even when you think you've dug it all out, a single root fragment can resurrect the whole plant like a green ghost haunting your soil. And let's talk about the fruit. It's not terrible, but it's not the sweet, magical berry the internet promised. Fresh gojis taste like watered-down tomatoes with a strange aftertaste. People say to dry them for a sweeter flavor. I tried that too. Still didn't love it. Honestly, if you crave antioxidants, you'll get more joy from a bowl of blueberries or a handful of homegrown strawberries. What makes the goji so tricky isn't just its taste or looks. It's the fight to contain it. You think you're cultivating it, but really it's training you. And if you're gardening in a small yard, a patio, or even a raised bed like many of us today, space is sacred. You want plants that give back, not ones that take over. So, if you're tempted by the hype, do yourself a favor. Keep the goji in a big container, far from your soil. Trust me, your garden, your weekend, and your sanity will thank you later. Part 2. The flying dragon, beautiful but brutal. When I first discovered the flying dragon citrus, it felt like I had found the holy grail, a true citrus tree that could survive my cold winters without a greenhouse or heater. Its twisted branches looked artistic, almost bonsai-like, and the name alone sounded magical. I imagined walking through my backyard in late autumn, brushing against glossy leaves, and plucking small golden oranges straight from the tree. But what I didn't realize was that this so-called hardy citrus would become one of the most frustrating plants I've ever grown. At first it was charming, compact, unusual, and a conversation starter. Then as it matured, I began noticing something unsettling: the thorns. Not tiny pricks like a rose, but 3-inch daggers capable of shredding sleeves and skin alike. I learned quickly that pruning or even walking too close could draw blood. It wasn't a plant you could trust around kids, pets, or your favorite garden sweater. And the fruit? Let's just say it looked far better than it tasted. I waited patiently for that first harvest, expecting a burst of tangy sweetness. Instead, I bit into a mouthful of sour bitterness filled with oversized seeds. It was so astringent it made my eyes water. Technically edible, yes, but enjoyable. Not even close. It's more suited for marmalade experiments than backyard snacking. The flying dragon taught me something important. Just because a plant can grow in your climate doesn't mean it should. As houseplant lovers and small space gardeners, We crave beauty, productivity, and safety all at once. But this tree fails on all three fronts. Too dangerous, too demanding, and too disappointing. If you're looking for a real win, skip the flying dragon and go for a dwarf Meyer lemon or a calamandan orange instead. They'll reward you with fragrance, glossy leaves, and fruits you'll actually enjoy, without leaving battle scars on your arms. Part 3. The jujube tree, the apple that never quite arrived. There was a time I was absolutely convinced that planting a jujube tree was the smart gardener's secret. Everyone online seemed to praise it. It's bulletproof, tastes like an apple, thrives anywhere. And as someone who loves trying unique fruits, I couldn't resist. The thought of having a tree that offered crisp, honey-sweet bites without constant spraying or pampering sounded like a dream come true. When it first started growing, I was impressed. The leaves were shiny, the branches elegant, and it handled dry spells like a champ. But then came the thorns, long, sharp, and hidden among the foliage like little ambushes. Pruning it became an act of courage, and the tree didn't stay small and polite like the photos promised. It shot up fast, sprawling and reaching over fences, constantly leaning toward my neighbor's yard like a nosy guest who wouldn't take the hint. Then when the fruit finally came, I'll admit, it looked promising. Small, reddish-brown, almost like dates. I bit into one expecting magic, but instead it was fine, just fine. It tasted like an apple that had lost its enthusiasm halfway through ripening. Not bad, but not something I'd crave again. And drying them did help. The flavor deepened a little, sweeter, more date-like. But honestly, the effort didn't justify the reward. What pushed me over the edge, though, were the root suckers. Every season, new shoots appeared in places I never expected. Near fences, under garden beds, even between paving stones. Each one had to be dug up and removed before it became another full-grown invader. For gardeners with big rural land, maybe the jujube has its charm. But for those of us nurturing cozy backyards, patios, or shared gardens, it's just too much work for too little joy. If you want that crisp sweetness without the chaos, plant a columnar apple or a dwarf pear instead. They'll stay neat, taste better, and never turn your yard into a battlefield of spikes. Part 4. The African horned melon, a long wait for nothing special. When I first saw photos of the African horned melon, it looked like something from another planet. A glowing orange fruit covered in spikes with a neon green interior that seemed made for Instagram. I pictured cutting it open on a summer afternoon, sharing it with friends, and watching their faces light up in amazement. So of course, I had to try it. I thought, why grow ordinary cucumbers when I can grow this exotic beauty? The vines grew like wildfire, long, strong, and full of promise. For a while, I was impressed by how fast it climbed the trellis and covered the fence with lush green leaves. But then, week after week, I waited and waited. It took nearly 100 days from seed to fruit, and by then, the season was nearly gone. When the first spiky melons finally appeared, they looked spectacular. I felt proud until I tasted one. Let's just say it wasn't love at first bite. The flavor was somewhere between a sour cucumber and a watered-down kiwi, with a texture that felt more slimy than refreshing. It looked like a treasure, but tasted like disappointment. Even my dog wouldn't go near it. And the spikes? They were no joke. You can't just grab the fruit casually. You need gloves or you'll regret it. By the time I realized how little joy this plant brought, it had already swallowed half my garden fence, shading out everything else I actually wanted to eat. That's when I discovered a better, simpler alternative, the cucamelon. It has the same curious charm, tiny watermelon-like fruits, and grows like a dream. They're crisp, tangy, and perfect for salads or snacking. No spikes, no waiting forever. The African horned melon taught me something all small space gardeners eventually learn. Not everything that looks spectacular is worth the effort. Sometimes the prettiest fruit just isn't worth the space it steals. Part 5. The autumn olive, the tree that took too much. When I first planted the autumn olive, I thought I was doing something clever. A fast-growing, nitrogen-fixing shrub that could help my garden thrive. Everyone online called it a super plant, the kind that feeds the soil while feeding the birds. I imagined a beautiful hedge that gave back to the land. bursting with silvery leaves and bright red berries. It sounded like the perfect balance between function and beauty, and at first it was. The small plant shot up like it was fueled by magic. Within a single season, it grew taller than me, and by the next year, it was a full-blown bush. I thought, this is amazing. I'll have berries in no time. And I did. But when I tasted them, the reality set in fast. The fruit was sharp, tart, and dry. Not in that pleasantly tangy way, but in a way that made my whole mouth pucker. Sure, birds loved it, but I didn't plant a garden just to feed the wildlife buffet. Then came the real problem. It didn't know when to stop. The roots started spreading. New shoots appeared far from where I planted it. Each time I pruned, it seemed to grow back twice as wide. It became the guest that overstayed its welcome, swallowing space, light, and nutrients from everything nearby. What frustrated me most wasn't just how aggressive it was, but how deceivingly pretty it looked while doing it. In early morning light, its silvery leaves shimmer like something out of a fairy tale. But behind that beauty, it's a conqueror. For those of us gardening in small yards or urban lots, every square foot matters. We can't afford to lose our best soil to something that gives little back. If you love the idea of edible landscaping but still want balance, try service berries or blueberries instead. They're gentle, manageable, and every bit as beautiful, without the guilt of pulling up yet another root that didn't know where to stop. Part 6. The aronia berry, the beauty that betrayed my taste buds. I'll admit it, the first time I saw an aronia bush, I was enchanted. Glossy leaves, clusters of deep red berries, and the promise of the most antioxidant-rich fruit on earth. It felt like the perfect plant for a health-conscious gardener. I imagined sipping homemade aronia smoothies, baking antioxidant muffins, maybe even giving little jars of berry jam as thoughtful gifts. It all sounded so wholesome, so rewarding. And to be fair, the plant itself is stunning. It grows neatly, the leaves turn a brilliant orange in fall, and it handles both sun and cold with no complaints. In a garden full of demanding plants, it's the one that never asks for attention. But the moment I tasted those glossy berries, fresh from the branch, full of confidence, I learned why they're called chokeberries. The name isn't poetic, it's literal. Within seconds, my mouth felt like every drop of moisture had vanished. The flavor wasn't sweet or tart, just astringent, dry, and hard to love. I tried again. I made jam, jelly, syrup, anything to give those berries a second chance. But every recipe ended the same way. Jars sitting in the fridge, untouched. For all its beauty, the aronia just isn't something you look forward to eating. And in a small garden, every plant needs to earn its place, especially when space is tight and sunlight is precious. What hurts most is that it's such a pretty deceiver. You want to love it, but you never quite do. So now when people ask me for a beautiful, health-boosting shrub that still tastes amazing, I point them toward blueberries or honeyberries. They're just as nutrient-packed, just as lovely through the seasons, but they bring joy, not disappointment, with every harvest. Sometimes beauty should feed more than just the eyes. Part 7. The Japanese raisin tree, 8 years of waiting for nothing. Every gardener has that one plant they poured their patience into, the one that promised something extraordinary if only you gave it time. For me, that plant was the Japanese raisin tree. The name alone was enough to hook me. I pictured a graceful tree covered in tiny sweet treats, something rare and elegant that would make my garden feel almost enchanted. The idea of a tree whose stems, not fruit, were edible fascinated me. I thought I'd found a treasure few had the courage to try. For the first few years, it grew beautifully. Tall, lush, and full of dark green leaves that shimmered in the afternoon light. Every season, I'd walk by and think, this is the year it finally fruits. But the years rolled on, and the fruit never came. 8 years later, not one sign of those sweet, raisin-like stems that had drawn me in. I began to realize I hadn't planted a miracle. I'd planted a monument to false hope. To make matters worse, this tree doesn't know when to stop growing. It shoots up fast, hogging sunlight from nearby plants, casting shadows over beds that used to thrive. It's not just tall, it's domineering. And the wood is soft, not strong like a maple or oak, which means it snaps easily in storms. The more it grew, the more it felt like an uninvited giant in a small backyard built for balance. The Japanese raisin tree taught me a hard truth. Not every unique plant deserves your patience. Sometimes the chase for something rare only leaves you with regret and wasted years. For gardeners like us, who grow in smaller spaces where every tree matters, it's wiser to choose those that reward your time with real flavor and steady beauty. If you want something sweet and dependable, skip the mystery tree and plant a dwarf mulberry instead. It gives back fast, year after year. No waiting, no false promises. Part 8. The Jerusalem Artichoke, the Underground Invader. When I first planted Jerusalem artichokes, or sunchokes as some call them, I thought I'd discovered the perfect crop. Easy to grow, tolerant of neglect, beautiful sunflower-like blooms, and edible tubers hiding underground. What could possibly go wrong? I pictured cozy autumn meals with roasted sunchokes straight from my garden. That earthy, nutty flavor everyone online raved about. And in the beginning, it really did seem like the ideal plant. It sprouted quickly, grew tall and cheerful, and gave the impression of effortless abundance. But here's what they don't tell you. Once you plant Jerusalem artichokes, you're basically giving up that piece of soil forever. Those tubers multiply like they're plotting a quiet takeover beneath your garden beds. You think you've harvested them all, and then, next spring, they rise again, stronger and more numerous than before. I've dug, sifted, and replanted that patch of soil so many times, and still they come back, smiling innocently as if to say, "Miss us?" And while the flowers are charming, the harvest isn't quite the reward I imagined. Sure, the tubers taste fine, a little sweet, a little nutty, but they don't store well, and too many can cause, let's just say, digestive regrets. It's the kind of crop that feels more like a prank after a few seasons. For small space gardeners or anyone who values control in their beds, Jerusalem artichokes are the friend who moves in just for a week and never leaves. They'll crowd out your herbs, steal nutrients, and haunt your soil long after you've decided you're done. If you love the idea of growing your own tubers but still want peace of mind, try yacon or sweet potatoes in containers. They'll reward your patience without turning your backyard into an underground rebellion. The lesson? In gardening, easy doesn't always mean harmless. Part 9. The hardy kiwi, the overachiever. That wore me out, I'll be honest. The hardy kiwi was one of those plants that stole my heart instantly. The idea of growing bite-sized, fuzz-free kiwis right in my backyard felt like a dream. A fruit that didn't need peeling, that could survive cold winters, and that climbed beautifully over an arbor. It sounded perfect. I could already imagine sitting beneath a green canopy in late summer, picking little kiwis by hand and feeling like I'd cracked the gardener's code. But reality, as it often does, had other plans. The hardy kiwi doesn't grow. It races. Within a single season, it had covered my trellis, the fence, and then started reaching for the shed roof. Its vines wrapped around anything nearby. Trees, wires, even other plants that were minding their own business. Every week became a battle of pruning and untangling, just to keep it in check. It was relentless. And here's the catch most people don't mention. You usually need both a male and a female plant to get fruit. That means double the space, double the pruning, and double the chaos. Even then, frost can ruin the blossoms before they set, leaving you with nothing but a mountain of vines and disappointment. When the fruit finally appeared, it was delicious. I'll give it that. But by then, I was exhausted. It felt like trying to raise a wild child that refused to listen. For small space gardeners or anyone juggling work, family, and a few precious hours of weekend gardening, the hardy kiwi is simply too much. It demands constant attention and a sturdy structure that can handle its ambition. If you crave that same sweetness without the struggle, go for seedless table grapes or a compact, self-fertile issai. Kiwi, they'll reward you without the endless wrestling matches. Sometimes the hardest thing in gardening isn't growing. It's learning when to let go of what looks perfect, but costs your peace. Part 10. The Indoor Banana, the dream that outgrew the room. Like many plant lovers, I once dreamed of bringing the tropics indoors. I pictured a dwarf banana tree standing proudly in my living room. Broad green leaves swaying gently in the air, maybe even a few small bunches of homegrown bananas hanging down one day. It felt like the ultimate statement of a thriving indoor jungle, the kind of plant that turns heads and fills your home with that lush, tropical calm we all crave. So, I bought one. I gave it the best light, misted it daily, and waited for my little paradise to unfold. But what started as excitement soon turned into an endless lesson in humility. Even dwarf bananas aren't truly small. They can stretch taller than you expect, with leaves that tear easily and drop constantly. No matter how often I watered, fed, or adjusted humidity, it never quite looked like the dreamy photos online. Instead, I found myself sweeping up leaf shreds and sticky sap, trying to make peace with a plant that clearly wanted a climate I couldn't provide. And the fruit? Let's just say, it never came. Growing bananas indoors is nearly impossible unless you have a greenhouse-level setup with high humidity, intense light, and warmth year-round. Most indoor gardeners, myself included, eventually accept that it's more of a showpiece than a harvestable plant. Still, I understand the temptation, that longing for a tropical escape right in your home. But if you want that same lush feeling without the heartbreak, choose a dwarf pomegranate, calamandan, or even a bird of paradise instead. They bring the same exotic beauty, thrive under normal indoor conditions, and won't turn your living room into a full-time job. The indoor banana taught me one final truth. Sometimes the most beautiful plants belong in the wild, not the window. And as home gardeners, our greatest success isn't in forcing nature to fit our homes. It's in finding harmony with what truly thrives beside us. Lessons from the plants that weren't worth it. Looking back at all these so-called miracle crops, I realized they each taught me something far more valuable than their fruit ever could. Gardening, whether in a sunny backyard or a tiny apartment corner, isn't just about growing plants. It's about growing wisdom. It's about learning when to let go, when to try again, and when to laugh at your own mistakes while you sweep up another pile of fallen leaves. Each of these plants promise something special. Exotic fruit, effortless growth, a taste of adventure. But what they really gave me was perspective. In the digital age, it's easy to fall for the next trending plant or the promise of instant abundance. Yet true satisfaction in gardening doesn't come from novelty. It comes from connection, from tending something that genuinely fits your lifestyle, your space, and your patience. So if you've ever fallen for the hype too, don't feel bad. Every gardener has a story of regret hiding behind their favorite pot. The important thing is to keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep finding joy in the process. Because the best gardens aren't the ones that look perfect. They're the ones that feel alive, honest, and uniquely yours. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which plant broke your heart or took over your garden when you least expected it? Share your stories in the comments. I read everyone. And if you enjoyed this journey through my biggest gardening lessons, don't forget to subscribe to Earthly Delights, where we turn every growing mistake into inspiration for a greener, wiser home.